Hello there. My name is Vin. I wrote the general idea for this story a couple years ago for a Dungeons and Dragons module. I never completely finished the plot and didn't plan on getting back to it to finish the rest. I summarized the plot that I have with some bullet points. I gave it to AI to rewrite to see how well it could do. I have no idea if this new story has continuity or is even interesting, but I hope it sounds well enough to listen to. We will find out together, and maybe we'll be surprised. While I narrate the story, I'm just going to be playing Elder Scrolls. It has nothing to do with the story. It's just a background video to watch while I talk. And we begin. Part 1. The City of Splendors. Waterdeep wore its wealth the way a king wore his crown, without apology. Towers climbed into cloud and gull. Stone bridges arched over busy canals, and the streets below hummed with the commerce of a city that believed itself permanent. But permanence was a story people told themselves. The world outside the walls always found a way in. The summons came at dusk, carried through the academies like a cold draught slipping beneath a door. Headmaster Vrago, robed in midnight blues and greys, his posture as rigid as the marble columns behind him, stood before 3 newly graduated adventurers and regarded them as if weighing iron on a scale. "You've been taught how to fight," he said, voice low enough to make them lean in. "And you've been taught why you fight. Now you'll learn what it costs." A council of lords had convened in the high chambers of Waterdeep, and when the Harpers asked for aid, the vote had been unanimous. It was rare for the city's powers to agree on anything without a bribe, a threat, or a favor owed. That alone made the request dangerous. "The town is Baston Massachusetts," Vrago continued, the strange name shaped carefully on his tongue. "A way stop along the trade road, a small place, a place people overlook." He paused as if listening for an echo that wasn't there. The plea came from one called Guerf, tour guide, shopkeeper, and what passes for a civic leader in a town that small. He didn't smile when he said the gnome's name. Vrago was not a man who wasted expressions. Then, as if to soften the weight of his words, Vrago reached into a velvet-lined case and drew out 3 figurines, each carved with loving detail, each no bigger than a clenched fist, each warm as breath against the skin. "These are your graduation gifts," he said, "not for display." The first was pressed into the scaled hands of the Dragonborn, a figure shaped like the creature he'd always loved as a child, an animal he'd sketched in margins and molded in clay when the spells went badly and the days were long. The second went to the elf, whose fingers closed around a different small beast, sleek, patient, wild-eyed. The third figurine waited like a secret until Vrago stepped close to the final graduate, gaze sharpened with private intent. "Figurines of wondrous power," Vrago said. "They will answer you when you need them. Not before." The 3 stood with the gifts heavy in their palms, heavier for what they implied. Vrago did not give trinkets. He gave tools. "Go," he told them simply, "and return with the truth." Part 2. The Trade Road. The road out of Waterdeep was crowded at first, merchants shouting, wheels rattling, guards laughing too loudly. But the farther the party walked, the more the city's noise unraveled behind them. Wind replaced voices. Dust replaced perfume. the world widened. Boston was meant to be a half-day's walk, close enough to matter, fair enough to feel like leaving safety behind. It was on a long, quiet stretch, where the road cut between scrubby trees and low hillocks, that they saw the wagon. It lay tipped on its side like a wounded animal. One rear wheel had snapped loose and rolled into the ditch. 5 crates sat in the back, lashed down, half covered, too neatly packed to belong to a traveller who truly lost control. A man crouched beside the fallen wheel, tools scattered, shoulders hunched in the posture of someone hard at work. But the act didn't reach his eyes. His attention snagged on the adventurers the moment they came into view, and a smile crawled across his face like something unpleasant. "Ho there," the man called, voice cheerful in the way a butcher's greeting was cheerful. "Bad luck, eh? Could use a hand with this wheel, unless you're in a hurry." The elf slowed first, gaze flicking to the crates, to the man's belt, to the road's edges. The dragonborn's nostrils flared as if he could smell the lie. The man stood, wiping his hands on his pants with a theatrical sigh. He had eyes that bulged slightly, as though they'd been startled too often and never settled back into place. "Name's Bard," he said. "Bug-eyed Bard, if we're being friendly." A twig snapped somewhere off-road. The dragonborn's head turned a fraction. Another sound, soft, almost nothing. A whisper of movement in the brush. Bug-eyed Bard's grin widened. "And if you're thinking of passing without offering help," he began, voice dropping into a practiced menace, "well, roads like this are—" The sentence broke in his chest. An arrow struck him with a dull, final thump. Bug-eyed Bart stared down at the shaft protruding from his sternum, as if offended by the rudeness of it. His mouth opened, trying to shape a curse or a plea, but no sound came. He toppled backward and hit the dirt like a sack of wet cloth. Silence snapped tight. Then the bushes erupted. A second man, thick-lipped, panicked, burst from cover and sprinted for the tree line without looking back. He ran with the frantic speed of a rabbit that had finally spotted the hawk. He didn't get far. A flaming arrow struck him squarely, and his scream tore across the road as fire took his trousers and climbed. He became a stumbling torch, smoke streaming behind him as he fled into the wilds, shrieking curses at whatever gods he still believed in. Above, leaves rustled. A third arrow hissed through the air and punched into the trunk of a tree. The impact jolted something loose, someone hidden among branches. A man fell. He struck a limb after limb on the way down, each crack of wood against bone a punctuation mark in his descent, and landed headfirst, with a sound no living spine should make. The elf stared at the 3 bodies, one cooling, one burning in the distance, one broken beneath the tree, and then looked down the road. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No voice calling triumph. No figure stepping into the open to claim credit. Only the wind and the faint scent of ash. They had not been saved by luck. They had been watched. Part 3. A Town Without Breath. Boston, Massachusetts should have announced itself with life. Instead, it was a mouth held open in shock. They entered through an empty lane lined with buildings that still stood, but no longer belonged to anyone. A cart sat abandoned near a well. A child's toy lay face down in dust. Doors were ajar, as if people had stepped out for a moment and never returned. The town's message board stood at the center like a lonely witness. Only one fresh note was pinned there, stark against sun-bleached wood. "Bring this to Baron Nivek." The elf reached for it. Something small slammed into the board like a thrown stone. A hand snatched the paper away with a speed that made the dragonborn blink. A gnome, dusty, grinning, eyes bright with mischief and too much loneliness, backpedaled with the note held high. "Too slow," he sang, then turned and sprinted. "Come on, follow if you're brave." He didn't try to vanish. He wanted to be chased. He wanted witnesses. He led them to a manor house that sat like a weary noble on the town's edge, still grand enough to demand respect, still quiet enough to feel wrong. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old smoke beneath the polish. And there, in a high-backed chair, as if he'd never risen from it, sat Baron Nivek. His hair was iron grey. His eyes were sharp. His hands rested calmly on the chair's arms. A lord, waiting for news. The gnome, Querf, because it had to be, bounded to his side with an exaggerated bow. "My lord," he announced, voice swelling with mock importance. "The heroes from Waterdeep." The Baron inclined his head, solemn and steady. He spoke of goblin raids, of livestock slaughtered on his farm on the hillside, of townspeople chased away into woods and roads. He spoke of a tomb being built beneath his farmhouse, his final resting place, now occupied by a goblin leader named Derp, who treated sacred stone as a den. "I sent word," the Baron said, voice rich with command, "to the Harpers, to Waterdeep. Your headmaster, Vrago, suggested I request his finest graduates." The words landed with the weight of official truth, but the elf's gaze drifted, past the Baron's chair, past the heavy curtains, to the way the light did something strange at the edges of the room, as if reluctant to settle. The Dragonborn felt it too, a faint shimmer, like heat on summer stone. The third graduate's hand tightened around the figurine in his pocket, as if it warmed in warning. Guerf's grin faltered for half a heartbeat. And then, like a mask slipping, the illusion showed itself. The Baron's outline wavered. His eyes became too bright, then too flat. The room's shadows deepened as if embarrassed. Guerf exhaled and shrugged theatrically. "All right," he said, hands raised. "Yes, it's an illusion." He tried to laugh it off, tried to turn shame into a joke, but his voice cracked around the edges. "I didn't think you'd come if it was me asking," he admitted. "No, not Guerf. Not the gnome everyone thinks is a drunk who sells maps and tells stories." His eyes flicked toward the empty streets beyond the windows. "But I came back from patrol and the town was gone. Everyone. The Baron." His throat tightened. He was still in his chair, dead, like the world stopped and forgot to tell him. The truth spilled out in pieces, each uglier than the last. The goblin attacks hadn't truly begun until a wizard killed Baron Nivek, a wizard named Tenebrous. Guerf had been in the forest when the slaughter started. He returned to an empty town and a dead lord. 2 dwarves, his friends, were missing, Asram and Balram. Asram had been taken by goblins. Balram had gone into the mines searching for his brother and never returned. Gwerth had been left alone with grief, a broken town, and a problem that didn't care about any of it. So he lied, not for gold, not for power, for hope. Part 4. The Tomb Beneath the Farm. The Baron's farmhouse crouched on the hillside like a tired guardian, its fields untended, its fences broken. Beneath it, the tomb's entrance yawned, stone cut by dwarven hands, carved with care, meant to last beyond a lifetime. Inside, the air cooled. The world narrowed to torchlight and echo. Smoke lingered in the corridors as if the stone itself remembered burning. In the first chamber, scorch marks clawed the floor. Ash gathered in piles. The stench of charred flesh and old fire clung to the walls. 3 goblins occupied the room with the casual depravity of creatures who believed the dead were just furniture. One rummaged through a heap of bodies, tugging loose rings and belts. One relieved itself in a corner, humming. One squatted by a fire and turned an animal on a spit, fat dripping into flame. The adventurers moved like a single thought. When the last goblin fell, the silence that followed felt more honest than anything they'd heard in town. Further in, they found drag marks, scratches across stone where armored bodies had been hauled away. A pipe lay discarded, carved into the shape of a warhammer. Gwerth's face went pale. "Asram's," he whispered. "That's his pipe. He carved it to look like his hammer. Toothbrush. He said it made him look fierce." No one laughed. Then they reached the statue. Timora stood with serene confidence, goddess of luck and fortune, both hands wrapped around the hilt of a sword that glimmered like dawn, trapped in steel. Its tip was sunk into a slot in the stone plinth. The sword's name, etched faintly near the guard, was Holy Avenger, a blade that carried a holiness too stubborn to be faked. Around the plinth sat 4 chalices, each aligned with a door marked in draconic script: north, south, east, west. A smooth orb rested in the western cup like a trapped moon. When the elf spoke the draconic word for west, the orb lifted, floating gently to the matching chalice opposite the western door. Stone grated, the door slid open, the other sealed shut. The mechanism was elegant, almost playful. It felt like a joke told by someone who trusted the world. But the hill of Holy Avenger bore an empty indentation, a place meant for a gem. A jewel had once lived there. Now it did not. Behind the doors lay 4 chambers branching like fingers from the tomb's spine, each with a pedestal meant to display one of the Baron's sacred regalia. Each pedestal was bare. The crown of radiance, gone. The boots of enmity, gone. The gauntlets of divine shielding, gone. The belt of the sacred mount, gone. It wasn't goblin greed, not alone. It was theft with purpose. At last they reached the tomb chamber itself. A shallow pool filled most of the room, water only inches deep, but strangely warm. The air above it shimmered faintly as if remembering lava. In the center rose a limestone sarcophagus, lid shoved askew at one end to create a sliver of darkness within. Inside lay a leather pouch, and within it a note scrawled in gleeful mockery. Ah, aha, aha, ha, ha. Aha, ha, 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 ha. Derp's laughter, preserved on parchment like a stain. Two hobgoblins stood guard, bigger, meaner cousins of their goblin kin, watchful and grim. On the west wall, half hidden behind the shimmer of magic, sat a treasure chest, bound in invisible force. A chain ran from the chest to a slumped figure, Asram. He hung there unconscious, bruised, breath shallow, alive, but only barely. The fight that followed was short and brutal. When the hobgoblins fell, the tomb stillness returned like a tide. They broke Asram's bonds and hauled him back toward breath and light. And as they left the tomb and stepped into open air, Gwar flinched as though expecting the sky to strike him, because he had spent too long believing something would. On the hillside, wind whispered through dead grass. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called, and somewhere, unseen, an archer watched. Part 5. Walls, gifts, and a town trying to live. Time did not heal Bastun, but it moved, and moving was something. Weeks passed. Goblin raids came like fever dreams. Each time they were beaten back, and each time the town looked a little less like it wanted to die. Gwerf and Chara, the unseen archer, finally revealed, a hard-eyed bandit hunter with a voice like gravel and a smile like a knife. Hired lumberjacks. They raised a wall around Bastun, rough but sturdy. They built gates north and south and posted guards on new towers, as if timber and vigilance could convince fate to look elsewhere. Then one morning, a courier arrived on horseback, with parcels wrapped in parchment and tied with hemp rope. Each contained a gift and a note signed with a single letter, V. Vrago. The dragonborn unfolded dark cloth stitched with tiny stars that seemed to catch light that wasn't there. When he draped it over his shoulders, he felt the world's edges sharpen, as if the robe held him closer to himself. The elf received a cloak whose weave shifted subtly, drinking in colors and shadows. When she drew up the hood, she felt her outline blur, like a leaf vanishing into forest. Vrago's gifts were not comfort. They were affirmation. You are still mine, the notes seemed to say, and you are not alone. Asram, once he could stand without swaying, examined the jacinth that Chara had recovered from bandits on the road, an orange jewel that glittered convincingly in sunlight. His fingers tested it, tapped it, weighed it with a craftsman's suspicion. Then he gave a bitter laugh. Glass, he said. Orange glass. Gwerf looked as though he'd been punched. Asram's jaw tightened. Balram would do this. He'd plant a decoy. He'd keep the real gem on him. Balram, the missing dwarf, became more than a name. He became a tether, a hope that pulled them east toward the mines. And in taverns and shops and whispered corners, other truths surfaced, like rot beneath clean boards. Kara spoke of the Eclipse, a thieves' guild that moved like a shadow across the region. He'd hunted their kind for coin and sport and something closer to rage. People said the Eclipse brushed shoulders with the Gentarim, though no one dared prove it out loud. Asram spoke of Tenebrous and of who he had once been. Callisto, Asram said one night, staring into a fire as if the flames held answers. He wasn't always tenebrous. He was good once, or close enough. Callisto's daughters, Ilana and Leda, had vanished through a strange, illusory doorway in caverns where he trained them. He could not follow. Days later, he found them dead at the foot of a waterfall, bodies broken, souls gone. He attempted redirection and failed, not because the magic was weak, but because the souls were unwilling or unavailable. Callisto turned his grief into accusation, accused his god, Lathander, denounced him. And when a devil offered certainty in exchange for obedience, Callisto took the bargain, renamed himself Tenebrous, and pledged to Asmodeus, Lord of the Nine Hells. Nivek had still trusted him. That was the tragedy beneath the tragedy. The deepest wound wasn't the goblins. It was betrayal. Part 6. A note that chose violence. Baston's message board began to fill again as the town clawed itself back into being. Requests for rare ingredients. Bounties. Please scratched in hurried ink. But one note appeared like a threat nailed to wood. Sub-creatures. The traveler has come. Choose and perish. Choose the form of the destructor. Kara read it aloud and went still. This is old conjuration, he warned, voice suddenly sharp. It turns thought into flesh. Whatever you imagine, whatever you're afraid of, it gives it weight and teeth. He looked at each of them in turn. Clear your mind. Think of nothing. The instruction was impossible. Guerf tried anyway, face screwed up with effort, eyes squeezed shut as if that helped. He began, then winced. I couldn't clear it. So I tried to think of something harmless, fun, like patrols, campfires, s'mores. The ground trembled. A low, slow quake rolled through the town, like a waking giant shifting in sleep. Kara swore and sprinted up the nearest guard post, peering into the tree line north of the wall. Smalls, he shouted down, using the nickname like an accusation. You're killing me. Something huge moved among the trees, white and rounded, absurd in shape and terrifying in scale. A towering construct like a child's dream turned monstrous, lumbering forward with relentless innocence. It looked like sweetness given form. It did not feel sweet at all. They met it outside the walls, arrows and spells, and steel thrown against a massive body that did not bleed, did not tire, did not understand mercy. It strode closer with every step, as if nothing they did truly mattered. When the thing neared the gate, when despair tasted like sugar and smoke, a figure appeared in a flash of power. Eris Beaumont. She stood with calm authority, an older woman with eyes like cut glass, and raised a hand as if scolding a misbehaving animal. Light gathered at her fingertips, brilliant and merciless. The marshmallow giant was consumed in an inferno that turned sweetness into a storm. The explosion rained soft white ruin over Bastun, coating roofs and faces, and the world itself in sticky absurdity. And in the stunned aftermath, as people scraped sweetness from their hair and stared at each other in disbelief, Eris spoke as if nothing strange had happened at all. I was a friend of Baron Nivek, she said. I would see his final wish fulfilled. Her voice held warmth, but it was the warmth of a hearth that could burn. I can help you find the missing gem, she added, and the words sounded like salvation. The Dragonborn watched her with narrowed eyes and felt the robe of stars shift against his shoulders like a warning. Part 7. Jolly Jormies and the Taste of Survival. Jolly Jormies Inn became the town's pulse. Hot food, loud voices, the comforting lie that tomorrow would arrive normally. Jormy himself was a broad man with laugh lines etched deep, wearing an apron that read, "I love pie," as if that was a creed worth dying for. He spoke often of his adventuring days and his injury with a practiced grin, refusing every invitation to join the heroes with a stubbornness that bordered on superstition. "Someone's got to keep the oven warm," he said. "Heroes need somewhere to sit when they come back broken." Inside the tavern, a drunk old man offered riddles for coin. Gamblers rolled dice. Dwarves flirted by candlelight. And for a few hours, the world pretended it wasn't sharpening knives. Then goblins attacked. 15 of them swarmed like a tide of cruelty. 3 to a hero, the rest snapping at Gwerf and Kara, like wolves testing weak prey. The fight spilled into the street, chaos made loud. And in the middle of it, the inn's doors exploded outward. Jormy came through like a force of nature, eyes wild, hands already clenched around 2 goblins by the legs. He swung them like clubs, bashing one goblin into another, until bodies hit ground and stopped moving. He roared, a sound of old courage and fresh fury. 5 goblins died to his rage alone. The rest broke and fled, and the adventurers, breath ragged, watched as the innkeeper stood among bodies like a man who had once been something more. Then, as if embarrassed by his own violence, Jormy adjusted his apron and muttered, "No dwarf tossing," as though rules still mattered. Part 8. Masks, Gardens, and Quiet Warnings. Calliope's shop smelled of oils and herbs, and strange things that should not be bottled. Birds nested in her pointed hat. She moved with the distracted confidence of a mage who had seen too much to be impressed. Her daughter Talea sat in the garden most days, mask covering scars no one asked to see. She planted seeds with careful hands, fingers buried in earth as if trying to grow a new life from ruin. She didn't speak. Sometimes she blinked answers, 1 for yes, 2 for no, when she felt like granting someone the privilege of being understood. One day she chose one of the adventurers, rose silently, and plucked a flower from the soil beside her, roots dangling, still clinging to earth. She pressed it into their palm like an offering, or an omen. Her gaze lingered, sharp, knowing, almost mournful, and then she sat back down and returned to planting as if the world's secrets were just seeds. Part 9. The Mines That Remembered. The mine doors east of town were iron and barred from the outside, set into the hillside like a mouth clamped shut. Inside, dwarven craftsmanship gave way to darkness and damp stone. They descended, deeper and deeper, until they found the cart on rails, large enough for 4, built for labor, but waiting like a trap. It did not move until all 4 were seated. When the last sat down, the lever in the center seemed to beckon. Someone pulled it. A cage snapped shut around them with a brutal clang, bars slamming into place like a bear trap closing. The lever jammed, mocking them. Then the cart began to roll. Slowly at first, wheels grinding metal against old wood, the sound screaming through tunnels as if waking everything that had been sleeping. Shadows skittered between stalagmites. Small figures, goblins, raced ahead, hiding behind stone spires. A strange light flickered on as though someone had lit the cavern for an audience. Greens, purples, blues dancing across rock like ghost fire. Then music began. A childish melody, tinny and wrong in the deep earth. Piano notes echoing through stone, cheerful in a way that made the blood cold. A song meant for laughing children, now played for prey. Arrows began to fall, rattling against the cage bars, snapping into wood, singing past ears. They fought as best they could from behind iron spells and blades, forced into narrow opportunities, while the cart crawled onward into the mine's throat. At last, deeper in the gloom, they found Balram. He was alive, captive, bruised, and the real jacinth gem, hidden inside his shirt like a heartbeat. Relief surged, dash, dash. And then Eris Beaumont arrived. Whether invited or not, she stepped into the chamber as if she had always belonged there, her presence folding the air around her. She asked politely to see the gem. Balram, weary and hopeful, showed it. Eris held it in her palm as though weighing a soul. Then she smiled. A dome of magic blossomed around the adventurers, trapping them inside like insects beneath glass. "It seems our heroes have gotten themselves into a little predicament," she said softly. "I just wonder, are you heroes?" Her gaze swept them, clinical, almost amused. "Or are you slaves?" She spoke of choice and obedience as if she had studied both like scripture. She conjured visions in the air, moments from their journey, each one framed by the same questions spoken by different mouths. "Would you help me?" Frago, the Baron, Guerf, Kara, Eris. "A powerful question," Eris murmured, "a command as it were for the slaves. You are tools, because a slave obeys." Her fingers opened. She dropped the jacinth gem into a portable darkness, a hole in the world itself, and the gem vanished as the opening snapped shut. Then she drew 2 daggers, holding them out at arm's length by their tips, offering them like gifts. The magical dome dissolved. "And now," she said, voice almost tender, "kill." The air held its breath. Steel rose. Spells sparked. They struck at Eris and felt the terrible wrongness of it. Their blows landed, their magic scorched, but she did not fall as a mortal should. She was hurt, yes, but not ending. Something in her resisted death like a lie refusing to be corrected. Then a flash of yellow flared behind her. Thalea. For the first time, the silent girl moved like certainty. A rapier slid through Eris's back with precise brutality, and Eris's eyes went wide with genuine surprise, as if she hadn't considered the possibility of being betrayed by her own shadow. Eris Beaumont collapsed into ash. Thalea leaned close to one of the adventurers, and for the first time since anyone had known her, she spoke. One whisper, absurd and small amid horror. "I'm a burb." Then she changed. Feathers erupted where skin had been. Bone reshaped. A parrot burst from the cloud of transformation and flapped away into the mine's darkness, a streak of color disappearing into stone. In the ash where Eris had been, a parchment lay untouched. It read, Gri Beaumont. As someone lifted it, the letters began to glow. They shifted, rearranging themselves like a puzzle solving itself. The name became a message. I am tenebrous. The mind seemed to grow colder. Part 10. The Harper in the Chair. Far away in Waterdeep, Headmaster Vrago approached another graduate, one the academies had praised, one whose eyes were sharp enough to notice what others missed. We need a third, Vrago said. Pack only what you need for combat and survival. Go to Boston, Massachusetts. When you arrive, you will know what to do. He placed a figurine of wondrous power in the adventurer's palm. It felt warm, like something alive pretending to be stone. When the new graduate returned to their room to pack, they found someone waiting. An elf woman, seated calmly in their chair, as if she belonged there. Ramalia Haventree. Her gaze was measured, her posture elegant. Her presence controlled the way a drawn bow controlled air. Vrago means well, she said, but he can be ambiguous. She spoke of the Harpers, semi-secret, stubbornly moral in a world that rewarded cruelty. She spoke of Gwarf's visit, of a town emptied and a baron dead, and of how the story was far larger than goblins on a farm. Romalia's voice did not waver as she laid out the truth, like a map. Baron Nivek had been a paladin of great renown. He had adventured for years with a wizard named Callisto, before Callisto became tenebrous. She told of the daughters lost through a magical door, of the grief that hollowed Callisto, of the pact with Asmodeus that filled that hollow with something worse than emptiness. She told of Nivek's final battle, a lich named Karlat, a monster who had sacrificed children to earn undeath. Nivek destroyed the lich, but in doing so took on a necrotic corruption, an illness with no cure, a slow death gnawing from the inside. Knowing he would die, Nivek built his tomb and commissioned protections, trusting an old friend who no longer deserved trust. Then Tenebrous killed him. And after the murder, the region's balance began to tilt. Without a baron, the eclipse would circle. The Centarim would smell opportunity. Baston's port and position on the trade road made it a prize for anyone who wanted power without scrutiny. But the greatest threat was not political. It was spiritual. Nivek's armor, 8 pieces gathered through a lifetime, was missing. His soul vessel gem was missing. And if his soul was not contained, if necromancy finished what disease began, Baron Nivek would not rest. He would rise. And whatever rose in his place would wear a paladin's legend like a mask and wield corruption like a blade. Ramalia leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the new adventurer with the calm intensity of someone who never asked frivolous questions. Now that you know what we know, she said, will you help us? Outside the window, Waterdeep glittered with false permanence. And somewhere beyond its walls, Butston waited, half-built, half-haunted, and poised on the edge of a story that had already begun to devour the people inside it.